Hey, what's up everybody? It's Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome to another MX Simulator Pro Series track gameplay, round number 8 of the Nationals from Millville, Minnesota. Yes, that's right, Millville has come and gone. We have Washougal coming up next weekend, but as with these videos in their customary form, kind of do these videos a little bit of a week late so that I can kind of talk about the race as it were in real life. So talk about this track for just a little bit, hit on a couple points that I liked about the track in sim and whatnot, and then of course talk about some real life funsies from this past weekend at Millville. So I thought this track was a really good rendition of Millville. I think in sim it raced about as good as it could for Millville. Like, the lines definitely developed in some pretty good spots. I have a road on 5 right now, so that should probably make the track weathering pretty good by around lap 5 to 6-ish, which is maybe where I'll get to in this video. I'd imagine probably 7-8 laps total. And I feel like the whoops were pretty gnarly in the sim races. I don't know why in real life they seem so small and boring, but in the sim races they seem pretty big and nasty. And then yeah, I mean, the track's based off the 2015 Millville, but they didn't make many changes to the 2015, the 2017 Millville, but they didn't make many changes in 2018 to the real life Millville, so it kind of all carried over pretty neatly. And yeah, Millville's one of the best circuits on the calendar. I really like the track. Never particularly did that well in it in MX Simulator, but love the hills and the mountainous terrain. They make pretty good use of it. One pet peeve I do have about this track is it seems like anywhere there's like flat ground, they try to put a jump on it, which is not my favorite thing. I wish that they would kind of use some more of the natural terrain available and make some cool stuff with some ups and downs. I mean, they use the hills really well here, but this like back section over here that I'm coming to, they actually made it go straight up into the uphill at the end of this straightaway this year. But it was basically 4 jumps in a row. Like, you came out of this corner, you did this table, you did another double, you did one more double, and then you went straight up the hill in front of us here. And I was just like, that, I mean, come on, like, maybe make one big jump in the middle of that section. I think there's trees overhanging it, so I can understand why they maybe didn't. But anyway, I mean, that's just me nitpicking. It's not really like a huge thing about the track. The rest of the track is really fun, and in sim, like I said, they did a pretty good job on it. So definitely recommend checking it out. It is in the description, the link to the track if you want to try it out for yourself, as it always is. And now, let's talk about the real-life Millville National. And I will start this week with the 450 class, which was pretty interesting, to say the least. Marvin Muscan having the red plate for the first time all year after Eli Tomac had a bike failure of some sort. They say that they don't really know what happened. The whole engine kind of went, but I don't know. And then gave him bad gate pick at Redbud in Moto 2, so he started way outside, crashed like 2 more times in the second moto, so it looked like the old-ish Tomac was kind of back, because we saw the same thing happen at Southwick, where he was having some issues and crashed a bunch. But then he comes out at Millville, and at least in the first moto, just did a pretty good job of a manageable, good race. Didn't start out front. That was Roxon that ended up starting with the whole shot, and he kind of took off early. And Tomac eventually got into second, started reeling in Kenny slowly but surely, got to him, and then Roxon did a pretty, I felt like, masterful job of just kind of taking the lines away where Tomac could make a pass. Tomac was very clearly faster than Kenny at that point in the race, and it seems like, Tomac kind of fell into his pace a little bit. I don't know if it was purposefully or not. He may have kind of just been biding his time, knowing Kenny doesn't really have the 35 minutes in him to finish the whole moto, and that historically this year he's gotten kind of tired late in the motos, so could have just been smart Eli. But it definitely seemed like once he got to Kenny, it was a bit of a struggle to find his way through. Even when he would turn it on, Kenny would kind of respond and do a really good job defending lines, as I said. So made it tough for him, no question about it. But either way, Tomac was able to get around him, scoot away, and win the first moto pretty handily. And Muscan, who was running in third, crashed all by himself and went back to fourth behind Baggett. But they were, all four of those guys are pretty much in a league of their own. Barsha didn't get good starts in either moto, but got into fifth at some point during both motos, and that's where he would finish. But anyway, Marvin finished fourth in that moto, so it technically, unofficially, swung the points back in Tomac's favor, with him taking the victory, Marvin finishing fourth, and there only being a 3-point difference between the two of them. That was a 7-point swing right there, with Tomac winning and Marvin fourth, so that gave Tomac 4-point advantage in the championship standings going into Moto 2. Pretty much just needed to finish right behind Marvin. Marvin winning or not, the announcers seemed to overhype it as the race was going on, as whoever won between the two of them would take the points lead to the next week at Washougal, which wasn't true because Tomac had a 4-point unofficial advantage in the race, or from race 1. So if Marvin won the race and Tomac finished second, that's a 3-point difference between the two, which means that Tomac would still have a 1-point lead leaving. I felt like it was relatively simple math. I digress. Yeah, Marvin got out front pretty early in the second moto as another Kenny hole shot, or actually I think as a Bogle hole shot. Kenny got the lead pretty quickly, and then Marvin got to Kenny and passed him, and Eli did not get a great start, but it wasn't terrible. I think he was like 7th after the first lap, 6th or 7th. Made it happen early, got through a couple guys, and made his way into the top 3. Got to Kenny. I felt like got around him quick, just better, quicker than he did in the first moto. And going back to the first moto, I will say that I was curious to see what would happen as they got later into the race if Kenny was still doing a pretty good job of blocking, because Tomac did end up getting a little bit lucky because Roxon got super blocked by Dare DeMartile, and I just felt like Kenny was pretty well in control of like where he wanted to be in the race until that point. And then it's kind of like at Glen Helen earlier this year. The second Tomac got by, he just didn't have anything for him, which I think he knew, but I was curious to see how long that would happen uninhibited. Unfortunately, a lapper got in the way and kind of changed that whole situation, kind of spoiled, I felt like was going to be a pretty interesting battle to watch. Anyway, second moto, Roxon couldn't really hold Eli off, I felt like, for a terribly long amount of time. I mean, Tomac got to him 15 odd minutes into the moto, and yeah, Roxon did a pretty good job of holding him at bay for the better part of 8 or so minutes, I would say it was. But still, it just seemed like Tomac was just a little bit better that second moto, had it kind of figured out, and got around Roxon, and then set sail after Marvin. And man, this is where it just like blows my mind, the things that Tomac can do, and it almost puts him on James Stewart's level for me, with the way that he's able to do this. But it just, like, Tomac has this innate capability right now with the way he's feeling on the bike and his fitness and everything to kind of pick and choose when he wants to turn it up, and he chose to turn it up late in that race, go catch Marvin. I mean, you can go back and look at the lap times. It wasn't like Marvin dropped off. I mean, he was doing the same lap times, and lap times that were winning capable lap times up until that point, and Tomac just lit a fire under his tush, went and caught Marvin for the lead, and before you knew it, he was around him. I mean, Tomac was a beast the way that he got there and everything, and the pass looked really cool. But I mean, it looked really cool because Marvin made a mistake. I mean, Tomac did a really good job of squaring up Marvin in that corner at the bottom of Mount Martin before they went up the hill. But if Marvin doesn't, get squirrely and bank off the side of the wall like that, I think they still probably, Marvin maybe even keeps the lead going up the hill. I mean, he made that big of a mistake that Tomac was able to get him right there. Still a very cool pass by Tomac, but I felt like people blew it out of the water as like the most epic pass of all time, which I didn't really see it as. I was like, okay, Marvin made a mistake. Tomac railed the outside epically, but I mean, that pass doesn't happen if Marvin keeps his ground on the inside well enough there. So cool beans by Tomac. I mean, he totally made a statement in that moto of like, I don't care where you are, Musquin, I'm going to run you down at any point during the moto anytime I want, which is huge, because if you go back to last year, Marvin won Millville, and kind of, you know, like convincingly. Like Tomac had nothing for him, especially in the whole second half of the season. Like it just seemed like Marvin turned it up, and Tomac was, I would say, in championship mode for most of it, but definitely didn't have, you know, the same pace that he has now. And I'm curious to see, you know, what happens going forward. You know, Washougal is a very good Marvin track. He's won there in the past as well. And, I mean, Tomac's been pretty good there as well, but I would say it's more of a Marvin track. And I think this is going to be a pivotal weekend coming up in the championship, because if Tomac can do exactly what he did this weekend at Millville, have another 1-1 performance like that, and just kind of almost demoralize Musquin, I think it's probably over from there. I mean, I still think Tomac is the clear-cut favorite going forward for the championship here. But Marvin was so good down the stretch last year that it does make me consider that there's, you know, the possibility he does find that extra little bit that he needs, kind of like we saw at High Point earlier in the season, where, you know, Marvin was clearly the best rider of the two of them that day. Tomac just didn't have the pace necessarily that Marvin had, and he had to ride way out of his comfort zone to win the second moto. But I'm curious to see if Marvin's able to bring that kind of pace back later in the season, because at the moment it seems like Tomac's going to be untouchable going forward. I mean, he, you know, just had that extra ability at Millville that was pretty well untouched. And I talked a little bit, like I said, about his comparison to James Stewart. The one thing I don't seem to understand about Tomac is, you know, I'm not really like a super fan of any rider per se, so I'm not like trying to bank off of one person or the other. I just want to see good racing, and what I'll give up to Tomac is that while he is pretty clearly the best rider in the class right now, he at least makes it interesting most weekends, because he's not a good starter. Supercross, he was pretty good. I think the graded starts helped him. But because he gets bad starts every weekend, we always have these like late race battles going on that make it like seem way more epic than it is, because Tomac came from so far back to get there, which is really cool. But is it just me, or does it seem like every time Tomac has like a huge comfortable lead, he, you know, has these mental lapses that we always talk about? So it's almost better for Tomac, I would say, to get those bad starts and have to fight his way through. It's almost like he's able to turn his brain off and do extraordinarily natural things on a motorcycle that most people can't do. Whereas when he's out front all by himself, he begins to overthink it almost. You know, it's kind of weird in that sense. Whereas I felt like with Stewart, it was almost like he never turned his brain on sometimes. Like, you know, I love James and the way that he rode, but it seemed like even once he got huge leads, kind of like the old Tomac a little bit, he would still ride almost over his head and make really silly mistakes that were huge crashes. Whereas Tomac, when he crashes, they always seem to be little, you know, really silly mistakes that aren't huge crashes. Like the last like really big Tomac crash that I can think of was his 2015 crash when he blew both of his shoulders out at Colorado. He doesn't crash huge, but when he crashes, they're very purposeful crashes. It seems like, you know, he doesn't, you know, tip over here and there. I mean, he tipped over in New Jersey that one year and took an hour and a half to get onto his bike, but most of the time it's just these like little weird crashes that he doesn't get hurt, but the bike gets damaged enough that it's really hard for him to continue doing Eli Tomac things. So it's like James Stewart, but like in a lesser, you know, version. You know, it's like, yeah, I don't really know how to put it. Like, it's like Stewart, but not as intense, I guess. Like, not to make like a drug joke, because I don't think Stewart ever did actually take drugs, and that he shouldn't have gotten suspended the way he did. But it's like James Stewart without steroids is Eli Tomac. And again, like I said, that's just a joke. I'm not saying James Stewart took steroids. But yeah, I mean, this seems like Tomac's championship to lose at this point again, even though they're still this close in the standings. I mean, if he's gonna do those types of things every weekend moving forward, it's hard to bet against him. And Marvin's got to find a lot, not just a little, a lot. I mean, to the point where Tomac can just in the middle of the race bust out qualifying laps, go 4 seconds a lap faster, and seem like he's doing it kind of easily. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, the one caveat here is that it seems like when, things like that happen, Tomac does have those mental lapses. So if Marvin wants to bank on it, happening again, I wouldn't say it's the worst strategy because it did happen again in Supercross with Tomac. But, I mean, we do only have 5 rounds left in the championship. The odds are more in Tomac's favor at this point, so I don't know. Like, I just see it being more of a walk in the park for Tomac coming down to the line, unless Marvin can step it up. But we'll definitely have to see about that. Moving to the 250 class, kind of the same story, I feel like, with the whole Tomac making a statement. Statement made, Aaron Plessinger is... I mean, this is his championship to lose now. I mean, he would have to have some really catastrophic things happen. A couple mechanicals I think would be like the caveat here, where it's like, man, that would be devastating for his championship, but it wasn't his fault necessarily. Kind of like Tomac. If he starts crashing randomly, maybe even if he gets hurt, that's what I'm talking about with the catastrophic level thing that would have to derail his championship hunt, because he came into Alex Martin's literal backyard. I mean, the Martin family owns Millville, and the Martin brothers kind of grew up racing this track. They know the track so well. They have a name, or a mountain on the track named after them. I mean, I fully expected an Alex Martin 1-1 this weekend. I mean, he needed it to stay in championship contention. He was, almost, he's over a race distance behind, closing up on 2 race distances behind on Plessinger. He needed a 1-1 performance, and he just didn't have it. Said he made the wrong tire choice in the first moto, went with the wrong scoop tire, and kind of hurt him on the start, which eventually hurt him in the moto, so he only got a 7th. But even in the second moto, he hole shot with his changed tire, and Plessinger just moseyed on right by him. Kind of, I wouldn't say unchallenged, but Martin had nothing for him once Plessinger was gone, which is, I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like, Plessinger was so hot and cold at the beginning of the season, and maybe he's just on some weird hot streak right now, but to me, he's pretty clearly the best rider in the class the last couple weeks. Like, there's 5-6 guys that all pretty much run roughly the same pace, second on back, but Plessinger's just kind of that extra step above, and when Martin needs to be chunking away points, he's losing points in the opposite direction right now. I think the points gap is at 48. It could be wrong, but that's huge. Like, that with 5 rounds to go, I mean, you're almost looking at 1 whole national ahead. You can only earn 50 points total on 1 day of racing, and Plessinger's almost there. So he's looking at not only having a comfortable championship lead, but perhaps wrapping a championship up early at this rate. And of all races that I would expect Martin to chunk those points away, Plessinger goes 1-1. So I don't know how you bet against Aaron from this point going forward. I mean, he just looks like he's a man on a mission. Are there guys that can beat him? Sure. It seems like when Faulkner's been on lately, he can win. Occasionally, it seems like Martin has the speed to win these last couple weeks, but just hasn't gotten starts. Definitely there's some guys up there that are going to make it challenging for Plessinger to be just like the guy moving forward. But he's also kind of in a situation here where he can almost cruise this thing home, like just some consistent thirds, a 4th here and there, a 2nd, take a win when he can get it, and he's your champion. I mean, that's what happens when you build a substantial point lead. People seem to hate it when Dungey went into conservative championship mode, but loved it when Tomac did it. And now it's Plessinger's turn to maybe do that. I don't see him doing that because lately he's kind of turned up the intensity and seems like, you know, he's on a win every week kind of deal right now. But I mean, that's where we are in this 250 class. I mean, the 450 class is definitely the closer of the two championships, but it's almost as a foregone conclusion as the 250 championship, just because one guy is so much better than the rest. And right now in the 250 class, it looks to be the same way. I mean, I don't understand how on a home track for Martin he's not better there. You know, he had to win this weekend, in my opinion. For a shot at the title. So I mean, if he's not going to win in his home race, I gotta say that's it. I mean, I know it's 5 rounds early, but I can't see Plessinger losing this title from here, barring catastrophic changes. But we'll see. Anything can happen. That's why they dropped the gate. Maybe Plessinger has a 35-point swing weekend just like Tomac had at Redwood, and then suddenly Martin's right back in the championship and maybe, just maybe, does well in the coming rounds. I'd say Washougal and Indiana are very Plessinger tracks, but Martin's done well at Washougal before, so I'm not ruling him out of a win this weekend. Personally speaking, I feel like something's got to go right for these pro circuit guys, and the way Forkner's been riding lately, I could see him winning Washougal this weekend. I really could, just the way that you know, he's been riding lately suggests that he's on the verge of a breakout ride, and Washougal might be that ride that he's been looking for. Of course, Savacci's also ridden fairly well, but I mean, Forkner this past weekend was in a podium's position again and yard sailed out of it, so just no luck for the pro circuit guys, and I feel like that's got to switch at some point. So if it's not going to be Plessinger this weekend, or Amart, of course, I would think that Forkner is also a good pick this weekend. Yeah, I don't really know anybody else that really stands out off the paper to me as guys that could win. I know Justin Cooper finished second here at Millville, but he's an East Coast guy, and while Washougal does have kind of a unique non-West Coast-ish feel and look to it, I do feel that the West Coast guys do tend to excel on Washougal just because it's not just because it's a West Coast track, but it does kind of get slippery. The ruts get deep, but it's got a pretty slick base underneath of all the ruts and stuff like that. And then I feel like most of those guys have probably ridden Washougal before. So Justin Cooper, first appearance at Washougal. I mean, yeah, he did pretty good on the West Coast rounds at the beginning of the year. I don't know if I could see him necessarily winning Washougal. Podium, sure, but I think it would be between Martin, Plessinger, and Forkner this weekend in 250s. And then, I mean, you just can't say... There's no reason to bet against Tomac at this point. He is on another level. Can Musquin win this weekend? Sure. But I got Tomac going 1-1, because if he's going to pull off rides like that and not crash going that speed, he's going to be unbeatable. That's Carmichael level, that's Stu level capabilities that he's pulling off right there, and you can't do anything with that unless you either ride that pace or push him beyond that pace so that he then crashes, which is something that people tended to do with Stewart or Carmichael. If you could ride with them for a few laps, they tended to start making quite big mistakes, sometimes crash. So, you know, Marvin, I think, is going to need to step it up a little bit, and Martin is going to need to start winning motos if he wants a shot at this title. Otherwise, I got AP and Tomac all day long coming down to the end of these championships as we head to Washougal. Love Washougal, been there in real life before, and you know, it's a great track. I think a good addition to the calendar. The Pacific Northwest fans seem to really get behind it, and I hope you guys will enjoy it this weekend, as of course I will, and I sure hope you enjoyed this video. Hit us up in the comment section below if you would like to add to the conversation. I will try to get back to as many of those as I can, and hopefully you guys liked what I had to say, or if you didn't like it, then yell at me in the comments, and I'll be glad to quietly and firmly respond about how wrong you are in the comment section below. But thanks again, guys, for watching so much. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.